Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first December live stream. I am joined today by Venus Bradley. She is the head of acquisitions at the Manuscripts and the head of structural editing department, which she will explain soon enough. So, Venus, thank you so much for taking the time to answer my questions. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing really well today.
Well, without further ado, let's get into it. Tell me about yourself. How long have you worked in publishing? What motivated you to get into the industry? I want to know it all.
Okay. Well, so I'm not even sure how far back to start. I fell in love with reading when I was about 12. You all have that book that like makes you fall in love and you go, oh my gosh, if I can just find
Yeah.
more books just like this one.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like I've spent the rest of my life looking for the books that are just like that one that made me fall
Mhm.
in love with reading. I volunteered at libraries and I kept telling people when I turn 18, I'm going to get a job at the bookstore. I'm going to get a job at the bookstore. I was very sheltered, so I had no idea there was any other jobs
Mhm.
outside of working in a bookstore or a library. Like to me, those were the two options for books. And so I did. On my 18th birthday, I went down to Borders Books and Music. And I actually was the day before my 18th birthday. I was like, so I'm going to be 18 tomorrow. And I guess I wowed the lady and I got the job on the spot that
Oh,
day and started on my 18th birthday. So, and I
that
worked
was
in
the
bookstores
beginning.
for years, but I went to school originally for theater, which is not anywhere book adjacent.
Hmm.
And I worked in professional theaters for a couple of years. And then I said, I can't do this. I can't do this for the rest of my life. Constantly in competition, dealing
Yeah.
with drama,
Yeah.
drama in the theater. And I said, I'm going to go back to school. What should I go back to school for? And, somebody looked at me and said, what do you love more than anything in the whole wide world? And I said, books. Of course, books.
Who
And it
was that
hit me. It was like
person?
a lightning moment.
Who was that person? Everybody needs that person in their lives, I
It
think.
was just a good friend who just was like, well,
There
duh,
you
Venus, you love books. You work in bookstores. You've never quit the books, even when you were still working like full time at the theater. I was still trying to work at the bookstore just a few
go.
hours so I could get that discount, so I could get my books. And I was like, duh, of course. So I went to Emerson College. I got my bachelor's degree in writing, literature, and publishing with a focus in publishing.
Hmm.
It was there that I discovered that I would be a terrible copy editor.
Ah!
So that is where I did what I did not pursue. I took one copy editing course and said, well, that is definitely not going to be my life.
Mm.
But I wasn't sure where I wanted to do publishing and what areas. I ended up going to grad school right after that to get a degree in creative writing. I thought that would help me get a job in publishing. And then I started doing kind of freelance jobs on the side. I have done freelance for Pearson Education,
Ooh.
McGraw Hill, Brainy Baby. Trying to think of who else. Barbara Williams and Associates, which is a ebook vendor, things like
Yeah.
that. And I also have worked for Candlewick Press, children's book publisher. I worked in their young adult and middle grade section,
Yeah.
so not picture books.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting a job for several years with Duke University Press.
Nice.
And I've kind of worked the gamut. I've done a little bit of everything from front to back end. So I've done acquisitions all the way to print production and
Yeah.
finishing the book up and sending it to the printer and getting that final copy. So I always got to be that person who got to open it up and smell the new book smell. That fresh ink
Ain't
was
that a
me. And
dream?
I'd be like, okay. And then I'd
Ain't that
flip
a
through and
dream?
make sure everything's all right. And after working at Duke for a couple of years, though, I said, I really want to get back to the thing that I love the most, which
Yeah.
is editing. I enjoy editing. I'm a good manager. I like managing, but I also want to do some editorial work. And so I started my own freelance company and eventually got a job at Manuscripts, originally as a freelancer before I was moved into the department. As we grew, it became clear that we needed somebody over our structural editing department. And then that
Yeah.
role has just kind of grown and grown and grown. So
Yeah.
now I'm a little bit of everything. I'm doing acquisitions and structural editing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, impressive credits behind your belt. No doubt about that. More than 20 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess so.
it's so jading to hear
It's not
that.
quite. I would say it's like 17, something like
17.
that.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's be
and we're
accurate.
not going to count working at the bookstore as
I mean,
publishing. It is
how
helpful.
dare I?
It is super helpful. I know so many books. People go, "Have you heard of such and such book?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course I have," because I've
Absolutely.
shelved it a million times and I've seen it and sold it and read it. Possibly, I've read. As you can see, I have
Absolutely.
quite a library of my own.
Yes, and we are at
Um,
the library currently, the
yeah,
most famous in the world, as you pointed out to me.
Trinity.
Absolutely. So, Venus, let's dive into this. 17 years of experience, and now you're working at Manuscripts, but we are not a traditional publisher, but you do have experience in traditional publishing.
Mm-hmm.
So, for folks out there who are not experienced, they don't really know what publishing is about, how traditional publishers operate. Tell me about the gatekeeping process, because this is something that even I didn't know about and that you filled me in on. And I found that really helpful. So, please share with us.
So I always like to tell this story. When I worked at Candlewick, I had a book that I thought was fantastic. One of my jobs was to read books when they first came in, unsolicited or solicited manuscripts, and to write a reader's report for my editor. And the ones that I thought were really good were the ones that she would then read herself and make a decision on. And
Yeah.
so I brought this book to her, super excited. This book is so good. You should totally read it. She goes, "All right, tell me what it's about." And I started my little spiel telling her the basic synopsis. Okay, well, it's about a midwife. And she goes, "Stop. It's got a midwife in it. We're not going to publish it. We already have a book with a midwife." And I said, "Yeah, but that book's a sci-fi and this one's a historical fiction book. They're not even the same genre." She's like, "No, we already have one on our list. We can't publish another one." And I found that really shocking, but it's actually really common when books are already in a list or they already have one that's too similar to the one that you did. They're not going to publish one that's too similar because that'll be in competition with the book that they're trying to sell that's already on their list. And then there's so many reasons why your book doesn't get published. So many. You could just catch the intern or the editor on a bad day. Maybe they don't
Add
like
an addendum.
sci-fi,
I
or
was gonna say add an addendum. Stupid reasons. You mean
stupid reasons.
not
You know,
valid
you,
reasons?
you catch them on a bad day. They read it and they just read a book that was very similar to it right before yours, and so yours doesn't feel very original. They don't like hard sci-fi. They like dystopian sci-fi, but not hard sci-fi. So your book about aliens isn't their jam, and then you never know, because traditional publishers, typically their rejection letters are just like, "Sorry, this isn't good for us."
Yeah.
I got a rejection once for a book I sent and said, "This is not fleshed out enough." What does that mean? How am I
It's the
supposed to
first
fix this
draft.
book? I have no idea. And it wasn't a first draft. It was like a 10th draft. And I was
Oh,
still like, what does that mean?
yeah.
I don't know what that means. I don't know how to fix this book based off of that feedback. On top of that, the publishing industry for a long time has been known to be very sexist and a little racist. And it's been a hard push for people of color to get their books published in the publishing industry. I know that there's been a shift and a change with Own Voices, coming out a couple of years ago, but it's still very recent and very much in its infancy, those pushing. And then there's also books that publishers will just deem not good enough, not and I don't mean like not well written. I like a book that they don't think will sell enough. So everybody knows the story. Harry Potter was rejected 102 times.
Yeah.
102 people said this book is not good enough.
Yeah.
Even though it's become one of the biggest sellers in the world for any book ever. It surpassed Dickens a long time ago.
Oh yeah, Bible is worried about J.K.
Yeah,
Rowling.
yeah, I know, right? So, a lot of people, I had somebody once tell me, they said, I don't want you to turn my book into a commercial book, and I thought, I don't know how to turn your book into a commercial book either. And frankly, there's no editor in the world who does, because if there was, there wouldn't be 102 rejections for Harry Potter.
Yeah.
We all know how to do it. Every editor in the world, every acquisitions editor would just know what's a book that's going to sell, and they just don't.
Right. And I do have a follow-up question about that. So basically what you're saying is, here's the thing. How, in your opinion and in your experience, how does public opinion trends and all of that, what's going on social media, what's going on in the press, how much does that filter into the decision-making process of accepting a book?
Oh, huge. Yeah. Um, Huge. If you have a following, they're more likely to want to, pick you up because they think that you'll get more sales out of it. And that's what a traditional publisher is trying to do. They're a big
Yeah,
business.
to
They have a
sell.
lot of real estate in New York City that they need to pay for, and they need books that sell. And on top of that, you have you have the way that the industry changes. They're always looking for the next big seller.
Yeah,
So right now, it would be hard to sell a vampire novel
yeah,
because that ship is come and gone. And
yeah,
now we're in something new, but we don't know what that new thing is because we haven't done it yet.
yeah,
So it was vampires. And then it was John Green kind of books,
yeah,
sad contemporary,
yeah.
novels, and then it shifted to something else. And sometimes we're in between. And I think that's where we're at right now, is kind of in between.
Hmm.
I kind of keep waiting for all those pandemic novels to come out,
Yeah.
which they're not there yet. So that's the other big thing about traditional publishing, is it can take 2, 3, 4 years for your book to be published. If they really believe in it, they might slide it into the next list, but that might
Hmm.
be 3 or 4 seasons away.
Hmm.
And so it
Right.
takes much longer to get a book published than if you're trying to do it through a hybrid publisher.
Right. So exactly. Let's talk about that, because the times have changed, because they have changed. People, thank God, sort of taking ownership of their own life in general. So basically, they are not letting the overlords telling them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Only if you are chosen by the great overlords of the publishing industry, only then you are deemed worthy to have your
Yes.
story being told, which is absolute BS. I mean, come on, come on. So, why did you decide to work at Manuscripts?
So originally, like I said, I got the job through just freelance. And at first, I mean, I started 3.5 years ago. We were still very young and very small. When I think it started, we had maybe 30 authors in a group, which is
Yeah,
pretty small compared to where we're at now.
yeah,
Um, and I was like, okay, I'll just review first draft manuscripts. And it was fun. I was like, this is so much fun. I love helping authors make their books better. I tell authors all the time that my goal is to help them create books that they're proud of at the end. That is my goal. Uh, and I like being a part of that process, the hands-on process as well. I think any author, if they're watching this, who's had talks with me, I'll hop into their manuscript really quickly and be like, let me see what I can do to help you really quick.
yeah,
Because I like doing it, even if our call's not really about that. Sometimes I just want to see what they've got, and do a quick scan. I'll go, oh, I found your hook. It's six paragraphs down. You
oh,
got to move it up to the top, that kind of stuff. But help an author see where their plot holes are, and helping them see, where they can make it better. But ultimately helping authors who wouldn't have a voice
yeah,
otherwise,
oh,
that would be gatekept to oblivion, whose books will sit in a drawer forever because there is no publisher who wants to publish their memoir, and not because their memoir is not worth telling, but
yeah,
because that publisher has decided they're only publishing 5 memoirs a year and they're all going to be celebrities,
there
because
you
they
go.
want to sell. Does that mean that your story is not worth telling? Absolutely not. There are
Absolutely.
so many people with many years, as many as me, 17 years of experience in data analytics or business or hedge fund management, whatever it is,
Hmm.
and they have this wealth of knowledge that they should be sharing with the
Hmm.
world. And I like to see those become books, like, and I see the books
Absolutely.
at the very beginning stages. So
Yeah.
acquisitions is acquiring books when they're first coming into
Yeah.
publishing. So I see them very early on, and then usually about 9 months later, I start Googling, looking for whether
Oh,
the author's published yet, so I can take a look at their book and see I don't get to see their cover reveals and things usually, so that makes me really excited when I get to be a part of that.
no, listen, Mina, it's like your passion shines through. Like absolutely no one questions that. I do have a follow-up question. What do you think is the difference, if there is any, between selling the book, like actual sales, and the readership you acquire, whether you're independent or traditionally published? And is there a difference? Because
Is
it
there a
would,
difference?
in my opinion, like when you sell the book, when someone buys it, they're going to read it. So you have readership from it, no? Or is
You
that
hope. You hope. I got a couple books back here I haven't touched.
there you go.
I can't. I have to keep
That's
buying. I
why
can't
you're
stop myself.
that's why you're
Eventually,
here.
I'll get to
You're
them.
the
I'll be like
expert.
65, and I'll finally sit down and read
Yeah.
these books I bought. Um, I think that you cannot fully base readership off of sales.
Mhm.
One, because of libraries.
Yeah.
Unless you get a library report
Yeah.
and you know how many people have checked out your book, which you can do that, but it's really hard to get those numbers. You won't know how many people. You also won't know if somebody resells your book. So they buy your book, they enjoy it, and then they're the kind of person who doesn't keep a whole library of books in their room. And so those people are going to take it to a used bookstore, and somebody else is going to buy it
There you go.
and buy
Yeah.
it over and over and over
And
again.
over and over again.
Yeah, so you can't really base the initial sales are important just because you've got to pay for the costs of the book, or if you're doing traditional publishing, you have to pay back your advance, which is something we
Yeah,
haven't even talked about.
we
But
will.
you got to pay back that advance, and so you want there to be sales, but there's also a certain point later where did the book help you? Did it help you? I've had authors tell me that writing a memoir helped them heal through a process that they thought that they had healed from, and as they're writing it, they realized that they hadn't. Does your book help people? If you're writing a self-help book or a book on spirituality, has your book actually reached out and helped? So that there's a domino effect of more than just the people who bought it the
Right.
first time.
So my question then is a follow-up question to this conversation. Can any publisher, whether it's a traditional hybrid or even if you want to publish independently, can anyone, even yourself, give you such a promise, guarantee you sales or
Mm-mm.
readership?
No.
No. No, they cannot.
There's no, because the public is fickle. You
Yeah.
can't force people to buy. This was something that used to drive me nuts when I worked at the bookstore. They'd be like, push this book or sell this book.
Yeah.
At one point, Borders got desperate. Okay. I worked for Barnes and Noble as well, but Borders got desperate, and they started having like these books that we were supposed to push on people.
Yeah.
I worked in the children's book section, and it was an adult book about a Black widow who murdered her husbands. And I was like, I don't think I can sell this book to my clientele. Most of my customers are under the age of 12. They're like, we'll sell it to their parents. Like, their parents are not here to get a book on Black widows. Why are we trying to sell this book to them? But you can't sell a book to somebody who doesn't want it. And you can't sell a book if somebody doesn't have the money for it. If that's not what they walked in the door to buy. Now, on the other hand, I do talk to authors all the time about their core audience. So you're writing a book on, well, I'm going to use Call the Midwife as an example. It's a medical book. It's not a typical book that I would pick up and read. However, it caught my attention when it came across my desk as I was sorting through it when it first came out, or when it came out in paperback from the movie or the show, whatever. But when was this? Like 2000?
Call the Midwife. Oh,
forever.
Call the Midwife.
Yes. Yeah. So they redid the cover. They sent it back out, and I thought, I'll read this. I am not the audience for this book. I am the tertiary audience for this book, but I picked it up anyways because I thought it sounded interesting, and I really loved it. I thought it was a fantastic book, but I am the tertiary audience. So you have your core audience of people who would normally read medical books, and then you've got your next step, which is maybe people who are interested in some medical things or science or whatever, and then you've got your bigger audience, which are the people that you don't even know are going to be interested. They just will catch. You'll just catch them on the right day or the right whatever, the right cover sometimes.
Right. The right. Don't judge a book by its cover. Doesn't apply.
Oh, we totally judge books by their covers.
Absolutely. All the time. All right. Well, selling the book. So let's get into that. I mean, money, obviously, very, very uncomfortable subject, but we need to get into it to sort of be transparent with everybody as much as we can. So first, traditional publishing. Explain people how traditional publishers approach what is an advance, what are royalties, and all of those terms that a general public usually don't know about.
So typically, with a traditional publisher, you would sign a contract. Most traditional publishers require you to have come through an agent. They do not accept unsolicited manuscripts. Random House, Hachette, HarperCollins, Simon
The big
Schuster,
five, yeah.
Scholastics, none of those accept unsolicited submissions. You have to have an agent first. The
Mhm.
agent helps negotiate your contract. If you are lucky, I guess would be the word, they might offer you a
Not
decent
talented.
advance, which is a
This is
couple
this is
$1,000s.
this is very important. Not talented. If
It has
you're
nothing to do with talent. Nope. It has to do with how well they think the book is going to sell. They are
right,
not always right.
right.
You do not want to take a very large advance. The advance is an advance against your royalties. If you are unable to sell a lot of copies of your books, it'll make it look like you are an author who doesn't sell, who doesn't pay back their royalties. So you have to, the typical advance is $5,000, but authors like James Patterson will get $1 million deals for several books at a time. I recently read an article by an author, and I cannot tell you her name off the top of my head, but she signed a 6-figure contract and then didn't sell the first book very well in her 3-part series. And because of that, the publisher refuses to publish the other 2 books in her series, but also refuses to give her back her rights to her books from the other two books. So now she's stuck. She can't find a publisher who will publish her because it looks like she didn't pay out her advance, and so she's seen as a liability, and she can't get her books back for another, I think it's 10 years. She can't get her books. So she's lost them in a way.
Right. So people usually end up in debt.
Yeah, you start out in debt. That's what the
You start
advance
out,
is. Is it a debt to the publisher,
yeah.
who will take that money out of your royalties? So the way that works is, let's say you negotiate a contract, you'll get a certain percentage of the sale of the wholesale cost of the book.
Yeah.
So maybe 3%, 5%. It's pretty low. The publisher takes a large chunk of it. And of course, there's also costs that have to go into it. The reason the publisher is taking a large chunk is because they're paying for printing costs and overhead and all the publishers and editors and things like that.
Yeah.
So you'll get a certain percentage of that. Your agent gets a percentage of your advance, but usually doesn't get anything from your royalties. And then once the book sells, so let's say they print 5,000 copies, which is a very generous and large print run, by the way. Average when I worked at Duke was about 300. So 5,000 is a lot. But let's say that they believed in your book and they printed 5,000 copies. For everyone that sells it, let's say you're getting 3%. And you got a $5,000 advance, you would do the math and figure out how many books have to sell before you actually start making money on the book.
Right. So that's how it usually works.
Yeah, that's usually how it works. And then once you paid back your advance, whatever it is, that $5,000 or $10,000, you'll start getting royalty checks in the mail. Sometimes they are tuppence. Sometimes they're not a lot, depending on the book, but
you're dropping some hard truths on us, Venus. It is very hard to swallow it, but
I had a friend who posted her royalty check. It was $1.09.
Oh, it's right here.
She's like, "Yay! I sold a couple copies of a book this month."
No, listen, we need to hear this, so let's just swallow it together. All right, so that's how typically traditional publishers work, but we are not that, and you are the head of the department at Manuscripts. So as the head of the multiple departments, actually, pull back the curtain a little bit on our admissions process. Why, despite not being a traditional publisher, our acceptance rate is so low, and what happens once the author is accepted?
So if you are submitting unsolicited, which we do accept unsolicited submissions, and even if we reject it, we will not just say that it needs fleshed out more. Typically. So you would submit your manuscript to us, and then we are going to go through the book. We're going to do a quick read, but we're reading the whole thing to determine how, I don't want to say how well it's written, but how the structure looks. So when we talk about structural and developmental editing, I tell people it's the forest through the trees. I don't care about the periods and the punctuation and whether you cited everything properly. At this point, that's not as important. What I want to know is, does the introduction match the rest of the book? Does it make sense in the order that it's written in? Do you have clear and concise thoughts and ideas? Do you back up your statements with research and data and statistics? Do you have interviews that are legitimate and make sense in the book that you have? Is the book didactic? Does it is it repetitive things? And I'm looking to see if it isn't repetitive, does it make sense? So for example, I read a book once, and it said in the introduction it was about political satire, and then as we got into the book was about politicians who are funny. But that's not the same thing. Those are completely different concepts.
Yeah.
So the introduction didn't match the rest of the book, and that's a problem. Or for fiction, how is the characterization? Do all of the characters have agency and a good character arc? Are there plot holes you could drive a truck through? And I read again another example. I grew up right outside of New York City, and I was reading a book that was describing them parking in a garage and careening down the street of New York City, Manhattan, at 3:00 in the afternoon. And I thought, nope, they aren't going anywhere in 3:00 in the afternoon. And that's, to me, pulled me right out of the book.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for. Is this a book that a reader is going to want to read from beginning to end?
Yeah.
We know that for nonfiction, most people read a book in 2 to 3 sittings.
Yeah.
So we want our readers to come back. So are we going to bring them back? So what is your promise to your reader? What are you promising they're going to get by the end of this book? If you said that you're going to teach them about when to leave a startup, that was one I read unedited, was, when to leave a startup. If you're really into like doing startups, when do you leave? When do you back out before like they go sour, or, when you can, before they go public? Did you do that by the end? Do I actually have that information?
Yeah.
And could I walk away with this book with a new understanding based off of what you've written?
Yeah.
So when I'm evaluating books, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that forest and making sure it actually looks like a forest and not something else. Oh, look at this little garden that you planted. We need to actually do some work here. Yeah. So after they've submitted, we've done our review. We provide an abbreviated feedback form that tell, no matter how good or bad the book is, I don't want to say every book's bad, but no matter what state the book is in, we will provide a feedback form to let an author know what they can do to make it better. So they don't get that feedback of just flesh it out. And you're like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And then the reason why the acceptance rate is so low is because a lot of our authors who come to us are first-time authors. They've never written a book before. They have a fantastic idea, but they often need a lot of support to get there. Also, I don't know about anybody else, but I can't edit my own things. This is what I do for a living. I've done it for years.
That's a bad idea.
I edit my own books. So, and your friends and your family, they are not good judges of whether the book is good or not. I've gotten pushback before. Well, everybody in my family said it was great. Yes, I'm sure that for them it is fantastic.
Yeah.
But if we're going to publish this book, we need it to be good. And we need it to be the best book that you can write. And this is not it.
Yeah.
So that is the other thing that I'm also evaluating. And when I talk to an author, I'm trying to evaluate, is this the best book that you can write? At Manuscripts, we don't believe in ghostwriting. We want you to create the best book that you can write. So how can we help you get there? I've read some fantastic books. I picked them up and thought, this is a fantastic story, and now we need to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think I've ever read a book that I thought was unfixable. Never. I've read books that have struggled and have serious issues and definitely need some work, a lot of work sometimes, but I've never read a book that's not fixable.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that given the right tools, our authors can create good books. Yeah. So our acceptance rate is pretty low because we want to create books that we can be proud of, but our authors can be really proud of. So I don't ever want an author to walk away feeling like they published a book that they were not happy with.
Right. So, what's the acceptance rate usually with the traditional publishers, and then what's our acceptance rate?
Well, according to Random House, last time I checked, it's at 1.2% for acceptance. And they get a lot more submissions than we do. So I don't even
Thanks,
want to
bro.
know.
Thanks, Deborah.
1.2%.
That is
Yeah.
very helpful.
Some of the smaller publishing houses like Peachtree have a little higher. They might be 5 or 10%. You know, and it's a little higher for us, but it's partially because a lot of the books that are coming to us have already gone through our Modern Author Accelerator program.
Mm-hmm.
So they've already learned how to write,
Yeah.
and they've been working with a developmental editor for months. And when they, so when they submit, it's in a little bit better shape than it would be if somebody was just coming to us, you know, out of the blue and trying to submit
And
things.
basically this is the very important piece of information that maybe some people may be missing out there. The fact that we do offer different writing and publishing programs meaning imprints, and writing programs meaning writing programs. So once a manuscript comes in, not always but usually from our writing program that is affiliated with us, as we are a huge the fairly big corporation, the manuscript is in such a shape that we are able to accept it. And also, we are not a traditional publisher, so we operate differently. Would that be
we do? I mean, our acceptance rate is at like 17%, which is higher than a traditional publisher. And I'm actually happy with that number because I don't want it to be 1%. 1% it would be the gatekeeping again, that issue that we have again.
What are we actually saying with the 17%? We are not saying everyone can be a writer, because that's not true either. Not everyone, but we are saying we're not gatekeepers. Everyone is.
We're saying that everybody deserves to have a voice and deserves to tell their story, and we need to help you get there, because sometimes your story still needs a lot of work. So you know, I mean, it's a lot of books that come to us, you know, they'll be somewhere in between. You know, they're not horrible at all, like, but they also are struggling. They've got, you know, the author is confused, you know, setting with plot. They thought World War II was the plot. That's the setting. That's not a plot. We need an actual thing that's moving the story along, and that's missing, you know. So that's, to me, a major structural issue. You don't have a plot. You know, we've got a problem.
Yeah, I can see that that's a problem.
Yeah, major problem. Let's fix that, you know, before we move forward. But that is the biggest thing is with manuscripts, is there's always an opportunity to move forward. If we keep working on it, if you keep working on it, whether you work in one of our programs or whether you write independently and then come back and submit to me later. I just had an author do that from a year and a half ago. She was like, I'm ready to submit. I'm ready to move forward. I'm like, let's do this. I would like to read your manuscript, please. You know,
that's wonderful. So, all right, so we have authors who come to you, okay, I'm ready to move forward. So let's talk about that. How does the moving forward work?
How does the moving forward part work? So the book is first, if there's two different steps, actually, two different paths into publishing. The first is that if you're working in the Modern Author Accelerator program, you can move into publishing once you finish your first draft. We'll evaluate it.
90% of the book has to be finished. I'd like to point that out.
I would say 100%, but you know, okay. I tell people I can't publish a book that is not done.
Finished.
So I can't, so we're not going to move forward if you don't have a finished book. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, it's still going to go through two editors, a revisions editor and a structural editor. But first we got to get to the finish line. So that is the first path. Now we have authors all the time who life gets in the way, things happen, or they didn't go through our Modern Author Accelerator program. They just submit through our website, and those authors will submit, and we'll do an abbreviated feedback form first, and we'll see where they're at and make an evaluation. And then we'll say if they're ready to move forward with publishing, if we actually say it's ready to move forward, which falls into that 17%, pretty low. If they decide to move forward, then they would start the publishing process. So they'd be assigned a structural editor who's looking for those major structural issues. And then they'll get an agreement. They'll pay a deposit. That deposit pays for the front end work before they do a pre-sale crowdfunding campaign. So that pays for the structural editor.
It's
me and
refundable.
you and all the people who are kind of in the mix at the very
Right.
beginning before they've started their actual campaign.
Right. But the deposit is refundable. Do you understand that
Yeah.
correctly? Okay. And then they go into pre-sale. Now, again, quick follow-up question. What does the pre-sale actually accomplish? Why is this how we do things? Because usually when some vanity publishers or some hybrid publishers out there, they ask you to pay up front and fund the
Mhm.
cost of the book. That's not exactly how we do it. So
You
can you explain
can.
this? You can, absolutely, but we encourage.
So that is what I tell people. I've had people say, I could just pay for this book myself. And I say, don't. Because
That's
the
not the
whole
point here.
point, yes, the whole point is to get readers. We
Readers.
want people to read our book and we want them to be excited about it. So we want them to be a part of this journey with you, this writing journey. You've written the book, you've spent months working on it, and now you're at that point where you've got a complete manuscript. So you're actually ready to start through the
Yeah.
publishing and production of this book. Let's get some people on board, and get them excited. So not only do they get to be a part of the pre-sale campaign, but they also get to come to your launch event. I got to go to one back in June for an author that lives about an hour from me. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I get to go to an author events. You get to see the cover reveal. You get to be a part of all their updates. Oh, guess what, everybody? The book's going to the printer today. Like, you can send those updates to your backers and let them know what's happening with your book so that they feel like they're a part of something.
Yeah.
So they're helping you pay for this book. That is what they're doing, ultimately. But they're also your readers. Like, this is your first audience. They're the people who are going to review it, hopefully, and put it on Amazon and Goodreads and everywhere else and tell people about it and give it to their friends. And so these are your first readers. We want you to have readers. So pre-funding the book and yourself defeats the purpose of finding an audience.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, even if they are going to pre-fund, that they should go ahead and try to sell as many books as they can, because we want an audience, we want readers, and we want people to be excited about our book, and we want people to come to our launch event, and we want people to be a part of this.
And what baffles me a little bit about it is that this is not a new concept in terms of not even in the artist industry. Because if I remember correctly, and I do remember correctly, because I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan, this is exactly what she did back in 2008 when she blew up. She was building from the inside out, going door to door, asking people, please support me. Please buy my album. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to get my music out there.
Big authors have done it. Brandon Sanderson did it fairly recently. He felt like his editor was trying to make his book into something it wasn't, and they didn't want to publish it because they thought it was weird. And Brandon Sanderson writes some weird books, so I don't even know why you wouldn't want to.
And he's famous. This is a famous author.
This is a famous author who decided to do his own crowdfunding for his book, and he sold like $10 million worth of books, which is crazy. Cory Doctorow, who wrote Little Brother, decided to do his own audiobook and sell the audiobook through his own website because he doesn't agree with Amazon having the market share of audiobooks on Audible. And by the way, Amazon owns Audible, if nobody knew.
Yes.
Amazon owns Audible, and they have a huge share. Yeah. So Cory Doctorow said, no, I don't like it. That goes against my ethos, which is definitely against his ethos. So he crowdfunded his own audiobook.
Yeah, exactly.
I have, and you cannot see it, but I have about 150 board games. I probably have backed about 30 on Kickstarter. I'm very used to backing things and not getting it for 2 or 3 years. I keep asking my husband, because he backed it for me, where's that Peter Pan game? Where's that Peter Pan game? Have they shipped that Peter Pan game? And he's like, no, it's been 2 years. I'm never going to get this game.
Oh my God. No. We absolutely deliver. Our authors absolutely. You will get a book.
Yes. Well, and I probably will get this game. I've never backed anything that I haven't gotten.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're trying to say is basically to our authors, the whole conversation is shifting a lot because people are sick of some people who are above them telling them what to do. So if Brandon Sanderson is not above crowdfunding, and can you imagine that person? I don't know who his editor is, but can you imagine being that person who tells Brandon Sanderson, I don't think your book is very good. like after 20 years of proven track record
This
of
man's teaching master's classes at universities.
he's excellent. Listen, and I listen, I'm not a fan of the genre. I don't read his books. I read one or two and I'm like, okay, this is not for me, but I can recognize excellence, right? It's wild to me. Well, anyway, Venus, I don't have any more questions for you, but we do have some audience questions. So let's jump into that. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Let's do this. So Samuel is saying, um, what is a good way to fix a prologue? Interesting.
Well, first question is, do you really need a prologue?
Oh, yeah. Don't take it to heart, please. She's
no.
very
Well,
blunt.
no, that is the very first question that I would ask is, does it really need one? A lot of people want to add them into sci-fi and fantasy. They're usually a very different cadence to the rest of the book. Sometimes they'll take place like 500 years before, so you'll fall in love with a character in this prologue, and then you never see them again because the authors decide not to. So that's my first question is, do you really need one? Mm-hmm. They are not in fashion these days. So
people skip them, don't they?
People do. They do. They skip right over them. So if you're going to put information in there as like a teaser to the rest of the book, be aware that people do skip them. So your important information needs to be in the rest of the book. But if you're thinking of the prologue and you're like, I have to have it, think of it as a teaser. It's your teaser trailer to the rest of your book. So yes. It is it should be short, it should be sweet, and don't make us fall in love with anybody that you're never going to introduce us to again.
Oh, false promises. Don't break trust.
It is. Yeah, right on the first like third page, you make us fall in love, and then you kill them, and then you never see them again. What's happening?
Never heals. That would never heals. Listen, people are still reeling about the Game of Thrones ending. It never heals. Once you break the audience trust, it never heals. No.
So I'm a cheater when it came to Game of Thrones. I would read it, and then I fall in love with the character, and I start flipping, trying to find the chapter, because every chapter has the character name at the top. So I'd be like, does this character appear again? No, they do not. Like, I get really mad. Like, I get really upset. I quit reading by book 3. I was done.
Oh my god, I'm such a cheater.
Killing off all my
I always skip to the ending, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get invested into this unless I know the ending. So yeah, absolutely good. Thank you for your question, Samuel. And also he says, I was offered a chance to talk on his platform at least before the NaNoWriMo season hit. What happened to this? Well, my apologies, Samuel, on behalf of the company. We did have some cancellations due to COVID and rescheduling process. Someone will be in touch with you for sure. We still have live streams coming up in December. So thank you so much for watching and sticking with us. All right. Kyra is asking, how much does audience alignment shape your feedback? That's a good one.
Audience alignment. What do we mean by that?
Kyra, can you please elaborate? What do we mean by alignment? And we can, before Kyra restructures her question, we have one more. What is your take on genres that mix and match storytelling styles? For example, game lit or lit RPG. Interesting.
I love them. I love them. I love books that mix. One of my favorite series is The Deathgate Cycle by Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman. It is sci-fi and fantasy mixed together, and it's fantastic. I love it. And it even planes shifts. I don't know if people know what that means, but you've got a character in it who's a fantasy character in a sci-fi fantasy world who knows about our world. So he keeps referring to things like the Millennium Falcon and Star Trek and stuff like that, but nobody else knows what he's talking about. It's so wonderful. I love it. I like when there's a mix of storytelling styles and genres. I think that it comes across at least as unique. It feels more unique. It feels like you're doing something that maybe somebody hasn't done before. You know, somebody's done it before because there's nothing new under the sun. What makes the book unique is really you, the author. You're the ones who make this book unique. But ultimately, I enjoy the ones that mix and match, especially, for fiction, of course. It gets a little weird with nonfiction, because if we start mixing nonfiction genres and styles, I start going, okay, wait, this is supposed to be informative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. But
suddenly this is turned into a narrative with personal stories, and I'm a little confused about what we're doing here.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to point out, that it usually it works better with fiction. Like I've read some books, Mark Manson's book about self improvement
Mhm.
and self healing, and he does insert these personal stories into the nonfiction, but they usually serve a narrative purpose, like
Right.
what he's trying to do. So I can, and he's a skilled writer, so it's
But they,
different.
if they make sense, if your
Yeah,
stories are important to the story, if you're writing about, adoption and you are an adoptive person or a parent, then it would make
needs to
sense for you to
connect.
share some of your personal stories.
Yeah,
But sometimes you'll read a book, and especially ones that I'm editing because they need work. You'll start reading it and go, "This is supposed to be an informative book about data analysis," and we're suddenly talking about this job that you hated, and it doesn't make sense.
it
You
doesn't.
know.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering, Venus. So Kyra restructured her question just for, okay, just for context. Kyra went to Columbia. Okay, so this is not personal, Kyra. Everyone compared to you is a dumbass. So this is not a jab at you. This is a jab at us being dumb. So absolutely. Kyra says, so say a book is good, but it doesn't match the apparently targeted genre. Does that shape the feedback at all, or is the evaluation based on the book's quality?
For us in structural editing department and acquisitions, mostly it'd be both based on the book's quality and what we're looking for in the narrative flow and style and things like
Mhm.
that. I think marketing would be more concerned about matching the audience, so say you have a book that features a 15-year-old character, but you're insistent that it's an adult book, not a young adult book. That would be something that a marketing department would probably be more concerned
And
about.
we do have one of those. just for
Yes. Yeah,
just
they people are like, why are you insisting that this is an adult book? And sometimes it works. I mean, Jodi Picoult has My Sister's Keeper. The main characters are children.
yeah,
Ready Player One is in the fiction section. Its
love
main
that one.
character is 17. One of my favorite books, Jumper, starts out with the main character at 16. Those are adult books,
I
though, but they are
love
adult books. You
Jumper.
love Jumper? Oh my God.
I am obsessed. Listen,
I have all 5 of them. They're like right here.
listen. Why didn't you tell me this before? We worked together for like 2 years now. Why didn't you tell me this?
It's
I
my
need to
favorite
geek
book. I
out.
read it out loud to people. Like I've read it to my husband. I read it to everybody.
I'm obsessed with the Jumper. Oh my god, we
Yeah.
need to talk about this. We need to talk about this after the live stream for sure. No, all right then, Venus. We have no more audience questions. I don't have any questions prepared for you, but is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience, to the authors out there? Any final words of wisdom, confessions, anything that you have to say? We want to hear
I
it.
would say I know that the process of submitting your book is really nerve-wracking.
Mhm.
I have so many people who are so nervous about moving to the next step.
Yeah.
They've written a book and they're terrified to submit it. They're terrified to send it. They're terrified that we're going to say something mean, about it because they're so afraid of what the feedback's going to be. And I know that it's scary, but it'll be okay. We'll be really nice, at least at Manuscripts. We're super nice about our
We
feedback, but we
are.
really want to be helpful. And ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want to be helpful and get you to a place where your book would be good and you'll be proud of it, and we'll all be happy to have our name on it. And I tell people I don't really have a lot to do with the money. And at Manuscripts, this is not part of my job. My
Yeah.
job is to help writers write books.
Yeah.
And so that is the thing that makes me happy. And anytime authors have questions or concerns, I tell them that just communicate with your editor, communicate with the people that are on your team, because we can't help make the book better, and we certainly can't help you with the process unless we're all communicating effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, Venus, Kyra says, thank you both so much for your brilliant insights. You're very welcome, Kyra. And Samuel says, thank you for being here to answer our questions. Always,
Yeah.
always. We are very transparent. Everything that we do, everything that we want to achieve, everything we want to help you with, we are very transparent. As you have noticed, especially Venus and I, we are very blunt and don't hold back. So That's that's certainly a choice and a quality. So
I think it's super important to be honest
words
and
to live by.
yeah, like just be honest and open, and people appreciate it. And I have people tell me all the time that they appreciate our feedback, our openness,
We appreciate
so
you for I appreciate you for sure, and Manuscripts
oh,
appreciates you.
thank
Venus.
you.
Thank you so much. Well, you guys, we do have a live stream next week, also on Tuesday, also at 4 p.m. Please do join us. We'll be discussing books and how to submit and all of that jazz. So yeah, thank you again, Venus, and we will see you very soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.